Baroness Warsi, the first Muslim woman to serve in the UK cabinet, is warning that Islamophobia is dangerously out of control, putting some of the blame on her own party, the Conservatives.
Well, in her new book, she says Muslims are increasingly being made to feel that they don't matter in Britain. And Baroness Warsi joins us now. Good to see you this morning. We've talked about this in the writing because it's been such a passionate thing for you to write, something that you believed in. Muslims don't matter. And right from the very first sentence, people should know what to expect, I think, because you say, so I'm done with apologising. What a way to start a book, and it goes from there, doesn't it? Why was it so important for you to write this?
I think for a number of years now, I've been really worried about the direction of travel in the UK. And we're now coming up to 70 years of my family's in-country relationship with the UK. Grandad came here in the 1950s. And before that, of course, the relationship through what was the British Raj, British India. And both my grandfathers, paternal and maternal, served in the British Indian Army. My great-uncle was taken prisoner of war, fighting for this country. My father helped rebuild Britain in the mill towns of Yorkshire. I served my country at the cabinet, at the top table, and I have a child back in uniform serving this country and protecting it. And yet I am hearing over and over again that you don't matter, you don't belong, you're going to be held to a standard higher than anybody else. The rhetoric from politicians, from think tanks, from media rooms, the way in which Muslims are being depicted in arts, in culture, in sport. We saw the scandal at Yorkshire Cricket with Azim Rafiq. And I think it was either earlier this year, I was having conversations with friends and family, and so many of them were planning exit routes. They were putting together their plan Bs. I'm one of 5.
To leave the UK? To
leave the UK. I'm one of 5, and 3 of them have bought sanctuary homes elsewhere for when it gets too tough and we have to leave. And I think that moment just came to me. I'm now post-50, and I think women post-50 start to wonder what the future holds now. And I started thinking about my future generations and my grandkids, and I thought, I have to fight for my rightful place in my country. I'm not prepared to leave. I'm not prepared to accept that a country that my family for generations have helped to protect is no longer a safe place for me.
And you said that you've always felt before that you had to caveat before you could speak out with any clarity, a sort of an apology for things, an apology for what you term as bad Muslims, an apology for anybody who's done anything that happens to share the same religion as that. And you'd completed it just as the riots began and then thought, no, I can't complete this, I've got to add that in. Was that a bit of a turning point, do you think?
I think in many ways the arguments that I was making in the book about the fact that we are at a really dangerous crossroads in the United Kingdom, and this was a warning sign, really. I was calling the sirens to say, look, we really need to change course. Those riots were effectively what the book was saying, that if we do not change course, we are poisoning the public discourse so badly that we will see this play out. And it's easy, listen, it's easy to blame angry young men on the streets who commit this violence and are now serving time. But they're not the only ones to blame. The culture that's been created, the environment that has been created, the poisoning of the public discourse has been done by serious senior people in positions of power. And that's where the blame lies.
Can I ask you, I mean, look, it's a very personal book. It's very passionate. It's really provocative, but also it makes, when you read it, think hard about yourself and how you think and act. Because the argument in the book is not about fighting the extremes, extremist racism. It's the everyday way in which all Muslims feel as though they are being treated differently, in a second-class way, judged. Can you just give us some examples, the book is full of them, of how in practice, in real, normal life, people who in some ways don't know what they're doing make these mistakes and say and do things which end up with people like you feeling so kind of angry and frustrated and othered?
I mean, the most shocking part of this is, I'll give you an example which I talk about, and that's citizenship laws. And of all the people that I quote, it's Jacob Rees-Mogg, my colleague, who says that actually in this country now we have different classes of citizenship. We have those whose heritage comes from a different place, who are second-class citizens. And our citizenship really is a ticking time bomb. It's not a real thing. We are not permanent citizens. The state can at any time decide that we no longer belong and we no longer matter. And we saw the outcome of that. You know, for example, the most high profile of that was the Shamima Begum case. And what I argue is, look, if you and I, Ed, go out and commit exactly the same criminal offence, then you and I, according to the law of the land, should be punished in exactly the same way. And it cannot be that you are punished by being sent to prison and I'm punished by being thrown off this island. And that is what citizenship stripping is doing. It is saying to people like me, who have now been here for nearly 70 years, who have now got 5 generations of people who are British, who have served this country in so many different ways, that actually your citizenship is still conditional. And you better be an acceptable, palatable Muslim, because we may just take a decision that you no longer belong.
And is this particular to the Muslim faith, in your view? Could Jewish people, people from other countries that are Christian, who've come here, you know, and as you say, many generations born here subsequently, would they also argue that that's an issue? So
what's fascinating is that citizenship stripping, for example, if that's the example we're going to use, has been on our statute books for, you know, coming up to 100 years. And for most of those years, it was never used. In fact, during the kind of Thatcher government years, it was never used. And then, increasingly, what is fact is the more brown and black our nation has become, the more Muslim our nation has become, the more likely we are to use citizenship stripping. But that is one example. I go through example after example in arts, in culture, in policy making, in engagement, in sports, where time and time again what we find is that Muslims are held to a higher standard. I mean, freedom of religion and belief, freedom of expression, for example. I give examples of how if Muslim young students say X, they're likely to be penalised for that. But actually the most vile things can be said about Muslim community, and apparently it's done in the name of freedom of expression. So this book really is, for me, I want it to start a conversation. I want it to be a basis upon which we can sit down, think again, have the tough conversations, but then change course. We are at such a dangerous crossroads. Look across the world and we look at how unstable the world is. And more than ever, what we need is a sense of healing in our country and a sense of people coming together.
We said you were the first Muslim cabinet minister, a Conservative cabinet minister. You're now not a member of the Conservative Party. You have left. You're in dispute. There has been a row about language you use. Can you just explain to us how that happened, as far as you can, what the issue is, and how you feel about it?
Why it's offensive to some people?
And it's really interesting because there's been a bit of confusion. I have relinquished my whip in the House of Lords to allow me to deal with a complaint quite openly. But I had lots of... it's been interesting because the last few days I've had lots of friends to the left of politics who've said, yes, you finally left the Conservative Party, you know, and you were never, you know, you should never have been in that space. And then I have friends in the Conservative Party who are saying, God, don't do this. I am still a member of the Conservative Party, but I have relinquished my whip because I think it is important that when a complaint is made, you are allowed to deal with that in an open and transparent way, and that's what I wanted to do.
Can you tell us about the complaint?
Well, it's an ongoing matter. It's a legal matter. It's about a tweet, which is in the public domain, so it's quite easy for people to say. But my lawyers are now involved, and I've been advised not to talk about it until that matter has been properly adjudicated.
And when you look at the Conservative Party 2024, the leadership election, the candidate speeches yesterday, I don't feel, reading your book at the moment, you feel as though all of the candidates, anyway, are understanding the arguments that you are making. Is the Conservative Party at the moment a party which can lead the kind of change you want to see?
I think the Conservative Party have, of course, got huge issues in relation to its relationship with Muslim communities. To some extent, the Labour Party would acknowledge that they too have those challenges. But I think the bigger problem for me is that the oldest, most successful political party of this country, the Conservative Party has just suffered its worst ever defeat. And I think what we haven't come to terms with, before anything else, is why. And what I didn't hear over this last week of party conference was candidates coming to terms with the fact that the country had lost trust in us, that we were no longer seen as serious grown-ups. And at a time when Labour has such a huge majority, the country requires a loyal, sensible, grown-up opposition. And that's what we need to start to become first before we start having dreams of being back in government.
So, but you've not chosen a candidate?
I've not chosen a candidate.
But you're a member.
I'm a member.
So
I will
you've got
get a vote. I will get a vote, and at some point I will make a decision.
But you're not going to tell us who you're going to vote for?
No. I think, I'll try and focus on the kind of serious issues. I don't want to really get into the politics of this, and I don't want, actually, my colleagues to really take away from what I think is a serious conversation in Britain right now, which is, are we going to continue to be an inclusive, liberal democracy where all of our communities feel like they belong and matter?
I would say James Cleverly and Tom Tugendhat would be more favourable if they were reviewing your book than Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch. You think that's right?
I'd have to send it to them and ask them to do a review.
Oh, OK.
Good to speak to you this morning.
Thank you.
Cheers, Baroness Warsi.